Well, Rich here, my fellow Drifting Maniacs, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking you through what I think is one of the best RC car radios out there if you're into speedruns. I know quite a few of you are, so you want to pay close attention to the spec of this radio. In question today, we're going to be reviewing the Radiolink RC6GS radio. Now this is the version 1 that I've had for quite some while. Absolutely outstanding performance on here. However, the kind people at Radiolink have sent me this, which I've been using on my RC hypercar, and that I'm also going to use on my twin-engined Armour Infraction when I finally find a road where I can do a full-on speed run. The reason for this will become apparent in just a second, and that is because both these radios, the V1 and the V2, have a 600 meter range, 1900 feet. Okay, so you've got a total, if you run the thing as far away from you as possible, you've got 1200 meters, 600 meters away from you, 600 meters the other way as it goes past, which should be enough for just about pretty much any speedrun car out there. Of note, Kevin Talbot's using this exact same radio on his world record speedrun car attempt, but I'll put a link to it below the video. This is the Radiolink RC6GS V1 version. I've just got in the V2 version, so I'm going to get the camera down, going to have a look at the visual differences from the outside of the radios, then I'm going to drill down and show you all the features of this radio, of which both of these have got one excellent feature if you're into speed runs or high speed running at all. This radio has got ABS braking on it. You can actually set how fast it pulses the car. Might sound a bit of a gimmick, but if you're running at high speed, like well over 100 miles an hour, you don't want to be nailing the brakes and then the car lock up and skid off the road on there. With the ABS braking, you can still carry on steering, so if the car does pull to one side or you're getting far too close to that curb and you need to turn away at the last second, with this radio, you are going to be able to do it, which is a life-saving feature to my mind. I've tested it and it actually does work. It is not a gimmick. Anyway, let me get the camera down, show you the visual differences between the two, and then let's check out the technical specs of this radio, which also has a 10 model memory, by the way. Now the other key feature which stands out from its name, RC6, it's a 6-channel radio on here, which means it's also ideal for crawling as well as for speed runs. With those 6 channels, you can unlock your diffs, switch between high speed, low speed gear, turn your dig on and off if you've got an axial capra, as an example, which means it's a very, very versatile radio indeed. Now, it's got a 20 model memory, so you can use this for your crawlers, and you can also use it for your speedrun cars and set up every single parameter of the thing different for each radio on there. And there are a mass of parameters on this thing, as you will see. Now visually, the radios don't look that dissimilar from each other. Key features: the new V2 has the lanyard holder on that, comes complete with the lanyard. The V1 doesn't. I would say that's probably quite a good thing if you're out crawling. What else have they done on the car? You'd be looking, there's not an awful lot different there, Rich. The first other differential you will notice is they've shifted one of the channel buttons from here down to here. We've also got another channel switching button built in the handle here on there. So they're not too hugely different from the outside. However, turning them round to get a better look, you will note on the throttle and the brake, they've thickened up the plastic. I never found that an issue with the V1 on here, but it must have been for some people, for them to have taken feedback from users and strengthened that up on there. So they're not greatly different from the outside. Let's dig into the detail as to what you get for your money and how much control it gives you. Now another key feature from a speedrun point of view is, this radio also got one great feature on here. You can set effectively like a dead man's handle, a safety switch. Basically, if the thing runs out of range, bear in mind if you're using this for speedruns, you could be going at some serious speed with a 600 meter range on here. Basically, if a car goes out of range, the receiver senses it's gone out of range and shuts the car down and applies the brakes, and you can preset the parameters for doing that on the radio. Okay, now to show you this thing means business from the outset, we've got 6 AA batteries in the bottom to provide that 600 meter range power on there. Steering, obviously, throttle, brake reverse, antenna that folds down, on-off switch on the back, USB port where you can actually update the firmware on this, whether you've got a V1 or a V2. And while this button controls the steering trim, this one on the top here controls the throttle trim. This dial you can use to control the gyro on the car with, a bit like AVC or TSM, and you have another 2 channels down here which are simply on-off toggle switches. However, channels 5 and 6, well, they're 3-position switches on there, meaning you can lock and unlock your diffs using those without any problem at all. Anyway, let's turn it on, find out what all these buttons do. First of all, let's take a quick look at the receiver it comes with. As I say, 6-channel receiver, and these are fairly cheap. I will put a link to them below the video. As I say, you can run up to 20 models off of that transmitter. Now you'll note one key difference compared to other receivers. This thing has got 2 antennas. Ideally, they should be kept separate from each other rather than twisting them round in a pair like that. So just be aware of that. 6 channels on here. You've even got a little plus and minus power supply here for telemetry if you need it. And it also comes with this handy XT60 with the fly lead off there for running accessories if you need it. Not quite sure why that is included. Anybody knows? Then do tell me in the comment section below the video. And I would say it comes with a fairly comprehensive manual which is written in fairly good English, very easy to follow, explaining how to set up everything from how to bind the receiver and transmitter, but more on that in a minute, how to set the gyro up, gyro parameters, etc, etc. But it's far easier to actually show you on the transmitter. You can actually scan the QR code in and get a full manual downloaded to your phone, which is ideal if you're out in the field using this radio, to my mind. Okay, so firing up the transmitter on here, you will see straight away Rovan. That's the name that I've given to my default model on here. Now on here you can see the steering trim and the throttle trim for this particular car. If we press this button on the side here for the steering trim, hold that and that moves there up to 20. Let's set that 20%, so that's 20 points to the right. Hold it back down again because I want that back down to 0. This one on the top here controls the throttle trim. Same principle down there. You can hold it on and adjust it to your heart's content. How do we get to the menu, which is very, very extensive indeed. Hold down the exit and enter buttons together and we jump into this menu. You can now use the plus and minus buttons to move up and down, so we can set language, okay, English, Chinese, etc. on there. Press exit to skip back out. Okay, when I set it at a 10 model memory on here, press enter. Well, you can add new models on in this screen. Simply scan down and press enter there, switch to model 2. Now when I back out of there, all the settings I'm going to change on here would be for model 2. And you can change the name of model 2 using the name function on a transmitter. So you could label them like TRX4, TRX6. So this is where you change between the different models, but use the name function to actually change the name of the model. Hope that sort of makes sense out on there. And then I'll set it back to Rovan, which is what I want it on for on here. Move down, we've got endpoint adjustments, press enter, and you've got your steering percentage, your throttle percent, etc, etc on here. You can enter, you can change every single one of the parameters on all 6 channels on this car, which to my mind is absolutely outstanding. Moving down, number 4, steering exponential. You can see the straight line we've got on there. We press enter and you can increase or decrease that, and you see the curve changing on there. We're at 45%. You can also go the other way, so you can set up your steering rate to be pretty much exactly as you want. Now I'd actually recommend trial and error on your car as to what works for you on there, because what I like isn't necessarily what you're going to like. Let's move down another one. Steering speed. Turn ratio 100%. Return ratio 100%. That is how fast the steering is going to snap back into place. And the steering speed is, okay, you turn the dial on there, is it going to fly over at 100%? Yeah, sure, it's going to turn very quickly. If we turn this down, the steering is then going to turn slower on the turn in and turn out on there. Again, you'll want to set that to your personal preferences. To get out of anything, just press exit all the time. Moving on down. Now when it comes to the throttle exponential, press enter. Okay, forward profile on there. CRV, not quite sure what that is on the curve on there, but you can vary your throttle curve to be just as you want it. Okay, now that one is showing it as mode on. Press exit, move down, VTR, press enter, you'll see that one is turned off, but if you want to switch on that, then you can play around with the parameters on that. And the same with the braking curve, etc, etc. A lot of this is the kind of thing I would say, is work that's going to be done out on the street, trial and error, until you dial the car in and the transmitter to handle just as you want. Throttle speed. Now when it comes to the throttle speed, you're thinking, what throttle speed? What are you talking about, Rich? You can actually set how fast you want the car to react. So if you wanted it for, say, for speed runs, you might want the power to feed in gradually before you be going flat out. For drag racing, you might want all of the power in at the start. You can set that with this function on the transmitter. ABS, the one absolutely outstanding feature on this car. Press enter and say you can select the rate of the pulsing on here. Again, setting this up will come down very much to your preference of how you wish to drive the car. And we can set other parameters up, such as acceleration on there, around with just how much initial acceleration you want. Think of that as like a punch level, how much braking you want from the absolute outset on there. All good features to my mind. Idle up function, I believe, is for setting the idle rate if you've got a nitro car on there, so not so relevant to me with all mine being electric. Subtrim, you can change the trim levels on every single one of the channels. Reverse, scanning down into this, you're going to be able to reverse every single one of the channels. So you can have steering conventional, my throttle is reversed on the Rovan for various reasons. All the other channels are set at normal, but if you had a crawler, you might want to play around with these and set them into reverse depending on your servo setup. Dual rate, you can set steering dual rate, you can set throttle dual rate on there. Now you can mix the channels. PMI-X01, PMI-X02. So if you've got a boat as an example with twin motors on there, or a crawler or a tank, you could set it up so you could vary the speed of the tank tracks or vary the speed of the boat's motors to aid you in cornering. And next up, we have one of the potentially most important ones, but seems very unassuming, auxiliary channel. What, Rich? Now on the auxiliary channel, you can define which of the channels carries out which function on here. And you could change channel, for argument's sake, you could change channel 4, you could change it to the gyro function. But anyway, let's stick it back on steering. But the important one, I would say, whoa, this is definitely a Richie whoa moment. Because on channel 3, which is the gyro dial on here, if you were to go and change this function to throttle, that is now acting as cruise control if you had a crawler. If you set the speed by turning that dial around and just leave it on there, it'll be much like Traxxas cruise control on there. So this transmitter does have the hidden functionality to have cruise control on it, provided you set channel 3 to throttle on there. Absolutely outstanding to my mind. And the same with channel 4, channel 5 and channel 6, etc. Step back out, move down to name, enter. And while I've got Rovan entered in there for my model number 1, you can use this alphanumeric keypad setup on it to change the name for each one of your cars. Moving on down to alarm, you can select alarms for the transmitter, EXT, etc. on there. Moving on down again, let's move on down to gyro. And when it comes down to gyro, press enter on here, and you can select whether you want it off or on. And when it's on, turning the dial on the side varies the number on here, so you can check it's all working. I would just say, with regard to the gyro setting, by default the gyro is turned off, so turning this dial will have absolutely no effect on it unless you set it on the unless you first of all turn the parameter on the transmitter. And not only that, you're also going to have to turn it on the receiver. There is what they call an ID button in the end of the receiver here. When you turn the receiver on, you're going to need to press this 3 times very quickly within a second in order to get the gyro to come on in the receiver. The key feature for this Radiolink transmitter is number 21 FS, stands for failsafe. In this screen you can set all the controls to go to, the core parameters, what you want them down to when the car runs out of radio range on it. The steering, you can even set that so you could have it set up so as a failsafe, the car would turn hard left or hard right. Now, not convinced you necessarily want to do that, but it does give you the option to do that on the transmitter if you want. Now what I'm more inclined to do is to move down to throttle, press enter, and then using the throttle control, we can actually push that forwards so it brakes. So you could go to full brakes, 99% braking when the car goes out of range. To my mind, that is definitely going to be one that you want to play with, particularly the speedrun guys amongst you out on there. And I'm going to leave that as it is for the minute. Exit back out of there. So it's a key setting on there to my mind. Once again, while I can show you this, a lot of it's going to come down to how you want the car to handle in the real world outside, and that's only be done by trial and error. And ID seed, again, would have to read the manual on that one. And lastly, move on down, hit enter, and you can be able to reset the solder settings back to normal. And when it comes to setting up the receiver, the binding process is fairly simple. First of all, you turn your transmitter on. This will then bind with whatever receiver is nearest to it that's on. But in order to set the receiver into bind mode, you need to press the ID button, this little one in the end there, and hold that down for just over 1 second. When the light goes green, it means the binding process has started. When it stops flashing green, it means the receiver is bound to the transmitter. Well, I hope you liked today's first look at the Radiolink RC6GS. I think I might have called it CS along the way a couple of times, but it is the RC6GS radio that's got a cracking amount of features on for the money. 10 channel memory should be enough for most people. 20 would have been good to see on there. Anyway, this will be doing the speedrun duties on my twin motor armour infraction when I find a road that's long enough to run it safely on. Anyway, link to the transmitter below the video. Any questions, have your say in the comment section below the video. Thanks for watching. Well, thumbs up if you like this video, guys. Post any comments you might have in the comment section below the video and hit the circle below to subscribe. And if you do hit the circle, don't forget to hit the bell.